Part 4. Where does the fog come from? Humanity has come far in terms of the availability and access to knowledge. However, there have been many accounts in history where knowledge and ideas were considered dangerous and therefore were destroyed, repressed, and erased. The cycle continues well into the 21st century. The Library of Alexandria's destruction begins with the political need to destroy intellectualism as it threatened political power. This can also be seen parallel today in how non-factual ideas are spread and facts themselves misrepresented. There is a very real conflict in human society between knowledge and power. In modern society, the prevailing idea is one of openness and accessibility. Yet, the widespread occurrence of suppressing and manipulating facts and objective truth contradicts this idea. Here are some areas where subtle and unsubtle information management takes place in our contemporary world. The free and open market, advertising, politics, both within government and between groups of individuals forced together by duty or circumstance, education, religion, culture, history. Each of these areas is significant. In the context of history, there is an oft-quoted refrain about the victors writing history and portraying the vanquished as villains. There's a similar adage of the forum: the difference between a terrorist and a freedom fighter is who's writing the story. Morality, ethics, and respect for the law are all placed into context, and no judgment remains absolute. While some historical facts can be corroborated to maintain their accuracy and their validity, much of the why remains open to interpretation. We can never really know the motivations of the people who acted in certain ways. So the narrative fills in the sense and sensibilities of the decisions that drove action. Is the Boston Tea Party to be heralded as an act of revolt over an imperial imposing force, or was it an act of economic vandalism? At some point, the rebellion against the Townshend Acts turned violent, leaving a question as to how many innocents were targeted and injured, and if those injuries could really be justified. By comparison, when the Indian subcontinent rose against the very same oppressors, again, because of taxes, this time salt rather than tea, Mahatma Gandhi chose a path of nonviolence and civil disobedience. Both groups eventually won their independence, but is there moral equivalency between them? During the partition of India, the land of Kashmir had a Muslim majority that was oppressed by taxation under the Hindu princes. Their revolt never met with success, and the morality and ethics of the conflict remain in much debate 75 years later. As a result, the Muslims separated and formed their own country, seemingly to be free from oppression and exploitation. It doesn't take much digging to see how that worked out for them. Hint, not well. If we are to learn from history, what exactly do we take away from these events and subsequent outcomes and reputation for generations after? While there are some facts, there's a lot of narrative within history which can be severely biased. To truly learn from history, are we to form our own interpretation of events or rely on the, quote, experts to present their case and then just simply accept it? Similarly, this holds true in the corporate world. Ideologies are passed down as carefully crafted narratives with supporting talking points so that the rest of us can espouse them as our own. And when something is your own, you defend it with vigor. And therein lies the source of the fog. 99% of us are being handed a narrative about what is good, just, and right. And we are encouraged to go forth and spread the narrative as if it were gospel. And we, the diligent worker bees that we are, perform the task admirably. As long as our nose is to the ground, we can't lift our head and see the world for what it truly is. We are so busy being on task that we seldom stop to think, why am I doing this? Or is it good for me and the rest of society? Many have said, and I agree, that the moment you engage your emotions, you've lost the ability to think. Like being in fight or flight mode where your body is pumping more blood, your muscles activate. Your mind does the same when it feels threatened. We spend so much time being emotionally charged that we're too exhausted to just think straight. The psychology of why we allow ourselves to be so manipulated is beyond the scope of this discussion, but it is so true that we love our ideas, even if they were planted in us. We're so obsessed with being right because of the thrill that it brings when we always think we're right. We seem all too willing to just surrender our individual power in exchange for a sense of belonging to a group. After all, fear of loneliness is perhaps our biggest modern fear. After that, we're perhaps too afraid to just look around and see the state of the world, realize our part in its creation and condition, and recognize that something is deeply wrong with how we've all turned out. We live in a fantasy world where fantasy is someone else's creation and we partake in it because it's so much better than our reality. And the creators of the fantasy are all too pleased with our compliance and our participation as it keeps them in charge.